Welcome, everyone. I want to cover the book. This is a book review on Presto, How I Made Over 100 Pounds Disappear and Other Magical Tales. Tales is a good name for it, by Penn Jillette. Now, the reason I'm covering this as an occult scientist is that Penn Jillette, like so many self-proclaimed geniuses and experts, have went out to attack the occult sciences because of their highly qualified background as clown college graduates, high school dropouts, and theatrical magicians, otherwise known as tricksters, illusionists, and any other gutter term you want to use for this kind of provocative and trickster entertainment. They basically make a fool out of you, doing some very simple things that are disguised from your view. Now, I've always liked stage magicians and have seen many of them because it is a fascinating, and to a certain extent, if you think about it, which I've stopped watching them and going to their shows many years ago, because they're basically slapping you in the face. They're treating you like an idiot. And if they come up to you personally in one of these things and do in-your-face type magic, well, it's all trickery. They're using gimmicks and gadgets, and they have clowns in the audience that are their dupes. They use all sorts of camera tricks and so many other things. But be rest assured that it's all trickery, and some of them you can buy for pennies on the internet, and many different magical supply stores and eBay, etc. We highly recommend anybody who has an interest in this or somehow thinks it's amazing or special to go out and get one of these inexpensive tricks and amaze your friends. A lot of tricks that these professional people use you can purchase for under $5. That's how simple and cheap it is to do it. And most magicians, they're really not magicians, illusionists, tricksters, try to give the impression that they are powerful occultists, and this happens because they have power. And this, of course, makes the show much more interesting. As a famous illusionist told me, who wants to go see a fake psychic? Who's going to pay to see a fake psychic? I'm Bill Smith, the greatest fake psychic in the world. Come to my show. Well, who would possibly go there? So you have to give people the illusion of it. That's part of their con artist game and their lies and trickery, that then they come out and want to tell everybody that they're experts on the occult sciences. So, I mean, it's important to do that. And one of the people who's famous at this nonsense is Penn Jillette, who's been a big supporter of Unamazing Randy and those people as well. As a matter of fact, he considers Unamazing Randy as his great mentor, a man he claims to have great love and caring for. A man who has a great question on every single level of what he's ever done. But I won't go into him. That's another side story here. But it is all part of this book written by Penn Jillette, Presto, which claims to be a New York Times bestseller, which is really sad, interesting, and all together. But, you know, this book really confirms, it's supposed to be about his experience of being an ignorant person, not knowing anything about his body, not knowing anything about food, not knowing anything about caring about himself or his family, ballooning up to 340 plus pounds, and then finding a particular diet to go on that worked for him. Well, this is a book that really is the ravings of a person who is obviously extremely bipolar. He contradicts himself throughout the entire book. He's trying to backtrack. Instead of being honest and coming out and plainly stating that he was wrong with pretty much everything he's ever thought, he backtracks, makes up things, talks about his two mentors in this diet program, which basically are people that advocate a vegan diet, something he came out against. Of course, he won't use that terminology because he came out against it in his infamous TV show, which condemned most anything that was smart and intelligent, and then danced a bunch of half-naked women around so they would get ratings regardless of what he said. Very typical Penn Jillette. whose background entirely is one of ignorance and stupidity. I mean, the plain and simple fact is this guy didn't graduate from high school. He has a very obnoxious, in-your-face personality. He basically started out as a juggler and went around the country juggling in different cities. And surprisingly, street magicians can make quite a nice living. As a matter of fact, I recently saw a special on this, some news reporting, and there are some bands and things that make thousands and thousands of dollars a day from street playing music. You know, if you've got hundreds of people passing by, dropping a few bucks in there and do a few shows, well, it's very easy to generate a few $1,000s. And if you're a juggler or other things, it's easy to make fairly decent money, much more than the minimum wage, doing what they do. But he decided to drop out of high school and do this. Apparently his family supported him, his police father, who apparently ran a jail, and he found this so fun and amusing that he built his special little custom house to look like a prison. Well, here we go with some really mental disconnections. I mean, this is obviously a person who's very disturbed. Reading his book further shows that this guy should be in heavy psychological care with his insane belief systems. I mean, he goes through one thing after another, making up things. I don't believe this book is a sincere effort by him, even though he was forced to the face of death with super high blood pressure and not being able to function properly because he was so overweight that he was forced to go on a particular diet. But, you know, this diet, which is claiming to be so miraculous, is not very miraculous at all. It's nothing more than a vegan diet, which he claims, well, it's not a vegan. They use lots of oils and sugars and what is he talking about? Vegans don't use lots of oils and sugars and salts and other things, which he claims. This is just not true. Yet he claims it there because he doesn't want to be caught in one of his numerous lies, which is the fact that vegan diets are really good for you. He likes to use the term because of his little buddy, the non-doctor Ray Cronus, who came out with this big diet and which is totally unproven and everything else. And of course, was even on TED. You know, they wouldn't let professional scientists talk about their theories of things on TED because they were too controversial. But here's a non-diet. He's a so-called scientist, whatever that means, who came out with this body amplifying, you could say, diet, which allows you to lose weight much quicker, which apparently does help kick the body in. But this is not a medical doctor. Ray Cronus is not a medical doctor. He is a scientist, so he doesn't really have that degree behind him in any way. But basically, he likes to use the term so he can sell more books and get more attention. Whole plant. Going out and saying the term vegan is like saying eat good. Well, we all know that. It's kind of a boring term. Whole plant. Oh, yeah, right. What does that mean? He's not telling you to eat the roots and the tops of plants. When he tells you to eat potatoes, he's not telling you to eat potato roots and eat the tops of potatoes, which I believe are even poisonous. So it's not the whole plant you're eating, is it? It's a vegan diet. You're eating vegetables. Secondly, this whole diet is based upon the fact of eating at small slots of time, which again, when you try and do this in life, makes it difficult to eat whatsoever. And if you follow the plan, again, you'll be eating so little because of the slot. And then secondly, it's impossible to eat vegetables and not to lose weight. You can't eat enough. Matter of fact, there are certain vegetables that have negative calories in it because it takes more to digest them than it does in calories. So anybody who's ever been on a vegan diet knows that they will lose weight, plain and simple. But he even goes more crazier than that, and he always has with his manic, depressive, psychotic way of looking at things, which instead of admitting that he's wrong about just about everything in life he's ever done, he goes on these quirks and contradicts himself. Of course, organic and non-GMO foods are all a big joke, yet that's all he buys. He lives on that. The people that are his mentors recommend that. Yet he still condemns that because of his idiot show. And his idiot show, which he didn't write, he was one of many writers on there. How much time the actual MCs of the show are involved in its writing are generally minimal. And of course, I'm sure he would say he did a lot of research when he claims he doesn't have any time whatsoever, along with his dumb playing high school Latin teacher friend. So the point is that these are all things that is not how Hollywood works. The bottom line is that staff writers are hired, and whatever their abilities are and whatever their research is what you get. And I found that they're pretty poor. They tend to surface research things. Who are the best-selling books out there? And they go and talk to that particular doctor, lawyer, whatever it is, or self-proclaimed expert. That's your research that you get. Now, the other person, of course, that he works with as well is Dr. Joel Frauman, whatever. Well, this guy at least is a real medical doctor and has been around for many years. And, of course, he advocates a much better diet than the one that Penn Jillette was on. And, of course, he now uses a lot of his recipes as well, which is all based in vegan food again. Now, vegan has gotten a bad name because it means people who look sick because they're so thin. They've claimed it's bad nutritional-wise and all the things that go with it, which just isn't true. Statistical data proves now, without a shadow of a doubt, because they've studied vegans now for close to 100 years, particularly in Southern California, the 7-day Advents. Now, there's studies been going on with these people for almost 100 years, watching them and so forth, and they have people in their mid-90s that are surgeons that are still operating and doing quite well. It's been proven that a vegetarian-vegan diet is completely and totally the best kind of diet for you, and that people that eat it live longer. Now, there has been arguments in the past that these people didn't live longer, that this was just not statistically proved. Well, that's a complete lie. The one thing that Pennyboy did state throughout his entire book is the vegan philosophy. He's not eating any animal products or processed products whatsoever. He's living on plain and simple vegetables 99% of the time, and he doesn't eat meat, he doesn't eat eggs, he doesn't have sugar, he doesn't have anything else. This is what's called a vegan diet. And basically, he readily says this. Then he says it's whole plant because he got that from Ray Kronig, or whatever, Kronice, and from the other real medical doctors. Been around for years. And if you go and watch what they state and what's on their YouTube videos and so forth, they are telling you to eat a vegan diet. Stay away from animal fat, stay away from all the processed stuff, and rightfully so, particularly Dr. Joel Furman, whatever the name, I think it's Furman. He wants you to add in important seeds and other things that carry oils, which are very important for your body. Something that Penn Jillette states he wants to stay away from. Well, that's very bad. And the fact that he lost a whole bunch of weight all at one time. Of course, he really had no choice at 65. But here's a guy who was eating cheese and he would then slobber onto it peanut butter in big chunks. He adds more salt to all of his dishes, and particularly to already heavily salted Mexican food. He would eat boxes of Krispy Kremes, and he wondered why he was very sick and 350 pounds. All his vital signs were to a point that he was going to die soon from his poor thinking, ignorant framework that he comes from everything. I mean, here's a guy that doesn't even know what a vitamin is. He doesn't know what good foods are. He thinks everything in his terminology is bullshit, meaning it's just nonsense. You know, Elvis Presley thought you could eat anything either and that he could psychically get the weight gone. It didn't work for him, and it didn't work for old Penn Jillette. But of course, his great research and his great looking into organics and other things, which he considers to be all garbage, that horse poisonous chemicals are good for you. That's what Dow Chemicals says. And I'm a libertarian, which means I don't want to pay taxes. I want more money, and we'll screw everybody else. His messed up mindset, his need of deep psychological analyzing, is in this book in bright black and white. It's there, people. You can just see how messed up this guy's head is, that he doesn't get anything, that he contradicts himself. And I find a lot of things in this book that just isn't right. As a person who's been a vegan and has a, he's amazed that food tastes like something after living on salt and sugar and fat. And he's just amazed that there's actual real flavors out there. Well, anybody who's given up salt and sugar to any great extent knows that when you go back on those things, it's like sucking on a salt cube. If you start eating things like cold cuts and so many other things that are in a lot of cheeses, which are loaded with salts, that you can actually, it's repelling. And that when you try and eat something really sweet, it's obnoxiously sweet. And you can start tasting flavors again. Like people who have stopped smoking and other things. And what's amusing about this guy is that here's part of his manic depressive mental illness is that he claims that he's never used any type of drugs, and he considers caffeine to be a drug. So he doesn't drink caffeinated coffee, smoke dope, or take any other dope, and he hasn't drank anything either. So I don't know if that includes all the soda he's down by the years, or if he even knows that that there's a lot of caffeine in soda. Probably not. That would take a little bit too much more study. He'd have to hire a writer to have him figure out what was in your can of soda. So he somehow thinks there's some great value to this while he's scarfing down entire hot out of the oven Krispy Kreme donuts, 2 or 3 pizzas with added salt on there, lots of added salt. And of course, wrapping bacon around everything. And of course, let's not forget that delicacy from Penn's Head, cheese with peanut butter on it. Something I've never even heard of, and which may actually not taste bad. Everything tastes good with peanut butter on it. But the point is that these kind of things, especially if you're big and fat, certainly aren't something to do, especially when you have 2 young children to take care of. And just in general, shows you how suicidal this guy is, that he's 350 pounds, his blood pressure is over 200, and the doctors tell him that, look, we're going to have to sew up your gut so you can't eat because you're killing yourself here. And this was his wake-up call. So he decided that he would finally go on a diet there and so forth. I don't know if he hired writers to check on that or not. But we must remember that, I don't really find anything that Penn Jillette does very sincere. I think this book, like everything he's done, is nothing more than another way for him to make money. It seems like everything in his career, including the fact that he claims to never take vacations, is all based upon the fact of his horrible desire for greed. Maybe because his poor days of being out on the road and trying to survive. But of course, that was his choice. As well it was to learn at 16 years old how to eat fire from a book and then burn your mouth every time you do it. That's the kind of high educational understanding that he has. But everything he's ever done really has been to promote his show. And he states right in there that when he went on Celebrity Apprentice, that it sold a whole gob load of tickets for his show, and that's what he did it for. And if you think that coming out as, well, I'm a nice Christian and I believe in a sensible diet is going to get you much media or sell books, you have to be living in a whole nother fantasy world. So when you're 6'8" and you're used to pushing people around like most big fat guys like him do, because nobody confronts you because of your size, you can be as obnoxious and as foul-mouthed as you want. Nobody really challenges you. And that's, of course, where he's coming from. He was somehow able to parlay this stuff with his playing stupid friend. How much playing, I don't really know. The high school Latin teacher, Teller, into some sort of show that he has done quite well with. Per the internet, his single net worth is $150 million. Yet he cries about money as well. Selling his house that he made look like a jail, because everybody wants to live in a jail. I mean, that's how mental this guy is. Claiming he doesn't. For a lousy $2.5 million, he wants to sell it and claims he needs the money. And, of course, won't the big libertarian doesn't want to donate it to anybody and somebody use it as whatever. He wants to make sure he gets his buckaroos out of it. So, more contradictions there. And, of course, the further aspect of seeing him on Wife Swap, which included his children, which he wouldn't even allow to get exercise, that was a big thing, and them just doing a little bit of exercise was a major thing, including himself. Well, this is part of the other reason why he's horribly unfit and grossly overweight, dying, basically, because of this. So, it's quite amazing that it takes this to get somebody who's rich and famous and has everything just to stop eating like a hog and killing himself. And not even someone who is a little bit overweight, but someone who seems to be trying to get fat by grossly taking in obnoxious foods. But no alcohol, no coffee. Of course, I guess he doesn't understand that sugar is another stimulant. Maybe he should have got off of that as well. So, this is the kind of insanity that you get from this person who somehow people give him credit. A person, as I said, whose major educational feat is going to clown college. He graduated from nothing. Whatever he, quote, self-learned is dubious, but he spent time in clown college, and that's his claim to fame after he stated he dropped out of high school on top of it. And of course, the other genius in his party was a high school Latin teacher who supposedly knew some Greek, and he likes to say he studied law. Well, I don't know what that means. I've studied law too. So the whole idea is that this kind of inane babbling that is in this book, where he claims, well, I'm not on this diet because I care about animals or anything else. It had nothing to do with that. Then he says, then he cries about animals being. Apparently, he cried for over a year after his parents or father died. Well, the point is that this shows a very emotionally unstable person. And of course, this just fits into his profile of how he acts. And he certainly doesn't care much about anybody else and how he condemns people and wants to call everybody names and so forth, because that's being honest. It isn't being honest. It's getting you the publicity that you want. You've written many books, Penn Jillette. They've all been made you money as long as your shows. You've promoted your shows with them, as this book is now another bestseller where you've made millions from that, and you've done it all to promote yourself yet again. This is one time when, of course, like you've been told about the occult sciences and other things which you don't believe, you finally had to go to the real information, find the people who are telling the truth to save your life. Plain and simple. So everything you believed before is a lie until you finally found the proper way of eating. Of course, you couldn't figure that out. And certainly shows your level of education. People that don't know how their body works, don't know what kind of foods, don't know nothing about healing or any other area, is a very ignorant person. And you qualify. Why should we believe anything else you say? Frankly, why should we believe a goofball, a Las Vegas entertainer with anything? You're out there screaming. Who cares if you're an atheist? You're nobody. You're a big 6'8" idiot. I mean, you're totally and completely uneducated. You have learned nothing. You spent all your time in your in your little business. You're not reading anything. You know nothing. You are forced to save your life. And of course, a hell of a lot of people helped you on that path as well. I mean, let's get real. You know nothing, and your so-called libertarian viewpoints are nothing more than the convenient way of ensuring you don't have to pay taxes on your hundreds of millions of dollars of assets. So it isn't really complicated. I recommend people read this book for two reasons. One, to find out how ridiculous Penn Jillette is. And secondly, to see what a typical vegan diet is all about and how you can get excellent results from it. But having a radical diet like he does and thinking in his bizarre bipolar world is not going to help you. It does appear here that, there are a few good things about this book to clarify a lot of misunderstood information on diet. And that is the psychotic need that people think they have for protein. You don't need a lot of protein. People live off of potatoes and rice as the main foods of this planet. And even those who tend to eat protein also include these basic starches, which have rice has just about everything you need to live on. So in it's a very complete food. Potatoes are similar in a way, and they still lack some nutrients, particularly white potatoes. If you eat colored potatoes or sweet potatoes, you will get the vitamin A you need. But these are foods that people can live on, are very complete. And there was a famous New Age bodybuilder guy called Ragnar, who was a big 6'4" guy who had huge muscles and never ate any animal proteins. You can get the proteins and things and build muscles without eating animal flesh. Ever since the cultivation of beans, we basically have never needed protein from animals, and even with diets out there of rice and even potatoes, you can sustain yourself on them with the help of some other things as well. In modern society, there are some very complete foods: avocados, almonds. You can live on these and build very large muscles. You don't need all this protein. And of course, he talks about this. So this is one good thing, or I should say he got this information from these other doctors and talks about a lot of misconceptions there. One thing about Ray Cruniz is that he also hypes the body up so you can lose weight faster. One of the problems is being on long diets and seeing very little results. But the diets are also fraudulently based in so-called whole foods, which has nothing to do with it whatsoever. It's a vegan diet. It also is very calorie restricted. You're only allowed to eat in a certain period of time during the day. You have 5 hours for the day to eat. Well, this is another thing that makes you lose weight because you get caught in this slot. People tend to eat 24 hours a day, whether that's snacking, etc. Your stomach is never empty enough, and this means you're adding lots of calories. When you cut that out, you allow your body to recover better, it burns things better, and you start to have less and less hunger after a period of time. So here again, it's about huge calorie restriction. And that's, of course, you cannot eat enough vegetables to ever gain enough weight. Does everybody understand that? But people don't want to eat vegetables. The attraction is that everybody likes starches. But, of course, you're eating these starches, which is rice and potatoes, corn, etc., and they all are very tasty, and they tend to be higher sugar content, natural sugars. So this is not like eating lettuce, which is totally, completely unfulfilling. So there is something to eating these foods, which these two doctors, not Penn, claim to be similar. If you eat just potatoes, you tend to be on a fasting diet, so they say, because of the way the body assimilates it. Now, with anything that's radical, these things, you're not going to stay on potatoes. You have to get off these diets. Doing any radical diets like this is a little bit absurd. If you just eat vegetables and you only eat for 5 hours, a 5 hour period of a day, you are guaranteed 100% to lose weight. Plain and simple. So this is not anything overly shocking. What is interesting is that this so-called potato fast, combined with some other techniques, seems to make people lose weight much quicker. And of course, this is very empowering. But the point is, do you stay on it? And you have to make sure you're careful with your health and everything else. Penn Jillette was very carefully watched by many people, and of course has lots of money to go to lots of doctors. And he lost weight dramatically and was able to, so much so that he had to get off of his extremely strong blood pressure medications that were keeping him alive because they were lowering his blood pressure too much. Now, but what this diet does tell everybody is what actually works and gets away from the myth of protein. But it brings in other myths like this is some sort of great fat-burning diet. And of course, Ray Cronus does try and bring the body's metabolism up dramatically by taking cold showers, which gets the core body going at higher levels, meaning you're burning more calories. Now, how well this works is unknown because you're still on this very radical, very low-calorie diet. Because the bottom line is it's a very low-calorie diet. It's very difficult to eat that many potatoes to get up to any high caloric content. You'd probably have to eat 10 potatoes to get what one Big Mac is. You're not going to be able to eat 10 potatoes. That's all part of this. The other thing, as I said, is that protein myth, which is true. People have this thing, well, you got to eat beef or you're not going to look like a bodybuilder, which everybody really wants to. Total nonsense. You can build lots of muscles without it. People need to understand that. Bread is poison. It's just the flour is garbage. When people started on these flour diets many hundreds of years ago, the chin and everything else started to get smaller, and that's why we have problems with our so-called wisdom tooth that have to be removed. Well, that's because we're no longer using our teeth the way we should. So that's an important aspect of it. The other thing that is brought out here that very few people understand, have always been told, is that exercise doesn't help you lose weight. Well, that's right, it really doesn't. It makes you hungrier, it starts to build muscle. So exercising is not something that helps you lose weight initially. I always say, you decrease the calories, you increase the outtake. Of course, these are tried and true, and I'm afraid, buddies and pals, it does work. If you do a lot of exercise and you're on a vegetable-only diet, a vegan diet, you're going to lose weight even more. But there's a fantasy that people think you have to do that. Well, if you get your internal body burning, which apparently taking cold showers and eating potatoes in particular, or this kind of specific diet, your body is working to get rid of all the fat. And as such, exercise complicates the issue. Well, this is very interesting and something that I personally had never considered that much. And certainly there seems to be a factual basis to this. It seems to work. People do this all the time, and they're losing weight without doing the dreaded exercise. And the other dreaded thing is living on salads, which nobody likes. Then they take in huge amounts of calories, putting on very fatty dressings. I believe at McDonald's, their salads have more calories than some of their foods because the dressings are so loaded with them. So there is something here to be learned in this bigger picture of the diet. And of course, the diet that we are been told to eat, this food pyramid, is the same diet that the agricultural department recommends to farmers to fatten up their cattle. Well, isn't that strange? So eating all these breads and all these other things is not what you need as part of your diet. So this book does highlight a lot of that in the bizarre, comical, and reading about a mental case like Penn Jillette here was enjoyable. I must say his book was a fast read. Listening to his babblings, his talking about stuff, his crude and disgusting way of putting so many things, is entertaining. There are some facts here that you need to get through, as long as you don't get caught up in some of his misconceptions and what I think are total, complete misunderstandings. So you can't get caught up in every word here, but it is interesting to note that these kind of diets do work, and that you don't have to exercise and you don't have to live on green salads initially to lose weight, which is a big put off to most people. He does live on a whole bunch of salads and other things later, and this is part of his main diet, as well as eating potatoes and so forth. But it is interesting to note that you can build muscles without eating animal proteins, and that these going on a diet of these things is not terrible whatsoever. The potato has been, and corn, etc., has been labeled as this horrible, horrible food. It's a terrible, worthless starch is what they tell you. Well, it really isn't. And as I said, potatoes, particularly if you use sweet potatoes or yams, have those vitamin A that is so critical that you can't get in white potatoes. And, of course, rice is almost a total and complete food. Half the population, or more than that, probably 3/4 of the population of the world lives on rice and potatoes. It could be as high as 90% of the population. And even in the Western world, potatoes are still a large part of the diet. When mixed and fried and put all this butter and other things, which, remember, this potato diet does not include anything. You take the potato and you cook it and you don't put anything on it. You're not putting butters, oils, anything whatsoever. You're eating the entire potato only. So don't think this is a potato diet that is French fries with ketchup on it and lots of butter. Well, it's not. That's not vegan. So when you eat a vegan diet, you're eating the whole raw food. Of course, he doesn't want to say that. He even states in there that his whole show, his famous bullshit show, was total complete bullshit, and he wanted to make a new show to go tell everybody how wrong he was with the first show. Well, this is very typical of skeptics and debunkers. The famous convicted felon, Brian Dunning, at least monthly, has a show retracting what he talked about in all his other shows. So this is very common of how they keep backtracking, because they can't justify the bizarre things that they say. I mean, you have to really wonder and allege if these are complete and total deliberate lies. So here he goes again. Everything he said in the past is bad. Why should we believe everything he says now? Why should we believe anything that's in this book? Because we know this book, like everything else he's ever done, is written to fill up his theater with people and to put money in his pocket in general. I mean, this is a guy who's constantly traveling around the country, constantly doing shows. He did Dancing with the Stars. Here's a 6'8" guy. What the hell is he doing that? He's doing it for publicity. That's a huge, very popular show. And I bet everybody thought they'd have a good laugh at him being the kind of goofy guy he is on a show like that. And of course, that's what it was all about. He didn't last very long. The same thing with Celebrity Apprentice, etc. He's a big mouth. He's makes good TV, and he's well aware of that. And that's all his entire approach here, and that needs to be fully understood. So I don't really, if you read this entire book, it really talks about how he's done everything just to promote himself. And I'm not sure we can believe anything he says, and quite frankly, he hasn't gotten anything right. But his sensationalism, the fact that he comes out as an atheist, well, that gets him a lot of attention. It gets him everywhere. The fact that he comes out as a libertarian, the fact that he comes out and joins with the rest of the Black Lodge type people, and condemns anything based in the occult sciences, just fits into getting in with that particular clique of people who are disinformation agents. How he fits into all this, what's going on, but it's amusing that anybody can call themselves an expert. And here's proof of somebody who is 100% non-expert. This ain't an expert whatsoever. Everything he's ever believed and everything he's ever done is wrong. He didn't bother to look into nutrition. He didn't bother how to purify his body, what was good for him, what to do, anything. Oh, that was BS, people. Doesn't care about that, doesn't care about animals, doesn't care about anything whatsoever, because all that's nonsense. It's all about me and my little ticky show and my little funny little skits I do. So he can fill his pocket with literally millions of dollars. I will state it again. It states online, and I don't know how valid that is. We must figure it's in the ballpark, that he is worth $150 million. Or I should say his children are. I don't think Penn's going to live much longer on this diet either. He has traumatized his body to the highest degree. But we'll see, Penn. So the whole idea is that this kind of complete and total BS that he has perpetrated on the public with his misinforming shows, his complete wrong ideas about food and diet and everything else is appalling, because he's a complete and total hypocrite. What works is what has been stated, which he condemned in his shows and continues to on every level, is a plain good vegan diet. And if you go back and look at all his old shows where he condemned things, which I have, there's interesting information there. How much of it is valid, we don't know. It's coming from a very prejudiced point of view, but he didn't do much of that research, if any of it. Staffs of writers do this, and he mouths the words, trusting what these writers believe because they chatted about it. So they chatted, and he told them that I believe this is garbage, and basically you better come up with research that confirms that. That's how these people work. It shows you with 150 years of metaphysical occult science research done by professionals that he refuses to believe the facts done by professional scientists because he doesn't want to. That's called mental illness. And you know, all these skeptics and debunkers are mentally ill. And I think this book really is a portrait of someone who is mentally ill and who should seek help as soon as possible. He has the money, or take a fund up for him so that he can go to someplace and talk to somebody. The fact that he thinks he knows everything is pretty sad to begin with. But this book is really a case of someone who keeps denying his place, keeps making excuses and lying for what's going on, stating what is really good and then stating it is bad. It goes on and on with a very confused person who's able to get away with his basic confusion because he's a spoiled celebrity brat who has money to insulate himself. A person like this in the real world wouldn't be around at all. Nobody would tolerate this guy. He was able to find this little niche for himself, like a few very select people are, for whatever reason, and been able to make it go. He's got a typical illusionist bit, and whether you like that entertainment or not is a personal choice. But he's been able to hide behind the Hollywood image because he only has to perform for 2 hours a night. In general, he would never get by with this kind of opinion, has no education, and would not be presented in any possible light or fashion without his little show that he puts on, that he keeps, apparently, knows that he's such a, basically has such a mediocre life that he has to go out and constantly promote things, so he constantly makes more and more money. All these books and everything else that he does is constantly promoting himself and his show, and it fills up his theater, and he benefits from it dramatically. It's all pretty sad, but you want to read something and show that what kind of a manic, depressive, and how mentally unstable someone can be, how they can justify their positions and attack people. Well, here it is, plain and simple. And I think everyone should read this if you want to really figure out who this Penn Jillette guy is, and where he's coming from, and how little he really knows. And he's hooked up to a bunch of other people The unamazing Randy never graduated high school either. I mean, why are these people authorities? They've done nothing. They've achieved nothing. Yet they push themselves out into the public as some sort of self-appointed authority. He's following a guy, Ray Cronus, who is not a medical doctor. Joel Fuhrman is a medical doctor and has been around for many years, written many books, and has websites, etc., teaching you how to eat a vegan lifestyle. It's as simple as that, just as Ray Cronus does. And the whole idea is to enjoy the food, get away from the fats and the salt. This is not a new message from anybody. I've been involved in this area of research for 40 years now. And this is the same thing that has been said by Jack LaLanne, Gypsy Boots, and a few other the old guys you probably never even heard of, is that you eat a vegan diet. And vegetarianism and, quote, health foods is nothing new. It's been around for probably since the 20s and maybe all time, that there's always been people that have stated, eat pure foods. This is what keeps you well and functioning. This is nothing new. This new aspect of using potatoes to attract people is probably a good one. You need to check with your doctor if that's safe for you or not. Penn Jillette makes sure that he clearly states in his introduction, to make sure that he's never sued or any other problem, is that he's not a doctor. He knows nothing of what he talks about. He's a dumb, stupid vaudeville comedian, losinist trickster, and you really shouldn't follow him. So he made sure he put in that, and of course in his own little snivelly way, so he covers himself. The point is that he's going out there talking like a doctor, showing people what he's done, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily a very positive thing to do. People are jumping on this diet and doing it, and I'm not sure that they shouldn't be consulting their doctor first, especially if you have any kind of physical problems. You should be talking to your doctor in general. The problem is doctors are not too helpful in these areas, but these are something you need to take, but it's a lifestyle. Even if you go on a potato diet and lose a lot of weight, are you going to keep it off like Selman? All diets work. They don't work when you get off them, and that means you're living a normal lifestyle. A lot of times, radical diets produce a weight gain that's more than the original weight you had. People lose 20 pounds on radical diets because they're so fanatical about it, and when they get off of it, they gain 30 pounds. So this is very, very common. So you have to get into a lifestyle, and you're not going to eat potatoes for the rest of your life as sole meals, nor would it be healthy. Apparently, it is quite cleansing and is equivalent to fasting. The statements are made. That's an interesting statement. We just don't know a lot of these things, but if you eat a vegetable diet, if you just eat vegetables, I'm guaranteeing you, you're going to lose weight. There's nobody who's ever been a vegan who hasn't lost weight. It's impossible. You cannot eat enough plant matter, vegetables, etc., to gain enough weight. Weight is only gained when you start eating processed foods, dairies, and meat, etc. This has all these chemicals that make you fat. Now, regular diets don't. You won't really find any species or any group of people out there that are basically fat by eating only plants, or we should say vegan diet, which is basically vegetables. Vegetables, which we all dread, but if they're prepared properly, they can be delicious, which is another thing with the amount of money that he has. He could have hired a great chef that would make very low-calorie, delicious meals. And believe me, people, I've eaten at restaurants around the world, and if you go and have a chef prepare you some of the stuff that you would never eat normally, just vegetables with great sauces on them, you would eat those like you would eat a McDonald's hamburger. Prepared foods, but we don't have that. Vegetables are, well, you're going to have steamed vegetables are horrible. Who wants to eat that? But there are better ways to make vegetables so they're savory and tasty without putting a bunch of cheese and other crap on them. You can certainly have these foods prepared properly and even eat a regular diet with some meat and fish in it. When they're prepared properly, they have very little calories in them. But let's make sure that you understand that this is a very low-calorie, eat-little diet ultimately. You have a small period of time to eat. The rest of the time you are fasting. And when you do eat, you're eating only vegetables. So this is how it works. This, of course, is basically a standard diet that works if you can stay on it. So the type of things he stated he did and other things, well, I don't know if I can give credibility that he was on this very strict diet and then he went out and ate like a pig, all this other stuff, and he didn't have any problems whatsoever. Well, I find that hard to believe. First of all, your stomach shrinks. I've done these diets. So I question a lot of information in this book. It's sensational. It's written typically by him to make money, and you need to keep that. Now, the bigger picture, as I said, there are some interesting things here that you need to understand, that exercise doesn't necessarily equate to weight loss, and the fact you don't have to be gobbling protein in your common animal form to meet the protein requirements of your body, or even to build muscles if that's what you're interested in. There are plenty of proteins that are not animal-based and you can live well on. That's a fact, and this book points that out. So these are certainly worth a quick read, although I wouldn't buy this book. You should go right to Ray Conage and to Joel Furman, read what they have to say, follow their diets. They're much more balanced. I mean, this shows a guy who's loony, who doesn't want to eat anything, eats like a pig all his life, and then goes to these radical diets, and then still does a lot of dumb things in between that, and still doesn't want to, for some reason, eating garbage by the boatload was okay, but God forbid if you should have a glass of wine or drink a beer. I mean, there's something mentally wrong here. So go to the actual people that he talks about and really avoid this book in general. I would listen to those and get something. This is just a comic book, and if you can get it for free, I would read it, but I certainly wouldn't go out and buy it.